Good evening, all. My name is Kumara Sidhartha. I'm a physician and the Chief Health Equity and Wellness Officer for Cape Cod Healthcare. Thank you for joining us this evening for this Wellness Trail event, which is the Heart of the Matter Top 10 Myths and Facts about Heart Healthy Nutrition. This is marking the Heart Health Month, February month, and the campaign on educating the community around that. At the end of today's session, you can put in your questions in the chat box. Even throughout the event, you can do it. But at the end of it, we'll go over the answers for the questions. You will also have time at around 10 minutes at the end to ask questions through the chat. If you don't get to ask questions and you come up with a question later on, you can always email us at outreach@capecodhealth.org and mention in the subject line today's event name and send a question, and we'll get back to you. And today's event is also being recorded, so the recording will be posted next week at Cape Cod Healthcare's site on this Heart Health campaign. That'll be www.capecodhealth.org/heart. And you'll find the video references to today's discussion on these facts, and also other useful material regarding heart health, including heart health risk assessment tools and other useful tips. So with that, we'll get started. We'll move on to the first slide. So just showing the outline, I will look at 10 myths and facts around that. And the references will be attached at the end, and it'll be uploaded for you next week, and we'll have a Q&A. So number one myth is thinking that blockage in heart's artery is just part of aging. And this is something very prevalent to consider and think that heart blockage is going to be happening to everybody, and it's just part of aging, and it's not considered as an abnormality. It's something normal, that it happens. And the truth is that there are populations in different parts of the world where heart disease prevalence is nearly zero, right? You can think about certain native populations like Kumara Indians in Mexico. There has been a lot of interesting epidemiological data looking at their health and heart health, and where their disease rate for heart disease is nearly nil. Similarly, North Karelia project, it's an intervention project that was done in a particular town in Finland, where lifestyle interventions was put in place, including increasing the amount of fruits and vegetables, and additionally physical activity and smoking cessation. And they found a dramatic 84% drop in deaths from heart disease over the years from 1972 to 2014. So we know that populations can do this improvement, and it's not just part of aging. Similarly, Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, California, one of the blue zones area, has also have very minimal heart disease risk. The next myth we're going to look at is that the common thinking that it's in the genes and it's not under my control, not under your control. And the truth is that the latest evidence on the new field of epigenetics is clearly shown that how diet and exercise can outmaneuver, overcome the effect of genes. Something in science, we call it gene expression, how the gene can manifest in the body as a disease. That can be switched on and off based on lifestyle factors. For the most part, there are some individuals, small percentage, where the genetic influence is too powerful for the diet and exercise to mitigate it fully. But for the majority, lifestyle can overcome the genetic effect. Myth number 3, clogging of arteries begins in the middle age. That we generally, when we think about heart attacks and heart disease and the process that goes on in the arteries, we usually think that, we think of a middle-aged person, right? but the original process, where the initial seed of a disease that sets in the arteries in the heart, that starts very early. And we know that from studies that look at autopsies of unfortunate events, young people dying from either motor vehicle injuries or in war, soldiers who are dying. And it has been clearly shown that a lot of them have the early seeds of the disease in their arteries starting at a very young age, average age in the 18 years. So we know that it starts early. So interventions and changes, including lifestyle changes, matters at the earlier stage of life. On the other end, the other myth is that it's too late to change my diet. Sometimes folks may think that, oh, at this stage of my disease, at this stage of my age, it's too late to turn things around. And again, and the fact around that is, and here is a news from the American Heart Association newsletter, clearly stating that eating a plant-based diet at any age may lower cardiovascular risk. And there are many studies. I mean, we can't quote all of them, but this is one good one that showed looking at large population, more than 31,000 people in 40 countries, and they were all of them were more than 55 years old. Interventions of a healthy diet, increasing fruits and vegetables, and decreasing intake of eggs, poultry, and red meat showed that their death from heart disease dropped by 35%, and getting admitted in the hospital with congestive heart failure, that events dropped by 28%. And this was regardless of the use of drugs. So next myth we're looking at is food. The food, if we are buying a product and the label says no cholesterol, that it's going to be heart healthy, right? So that's driven from a misconception that it is the cholesterol part, the fat part in the diet alone as the harmful aspect that could injure the arteries. And the fact is that there are multiple factors in the diet that can come together to create a blockage in the artery. It's not just the high-fat foods and cholesterol. It's also, high sugary foods can also injure our gut lining, release inflammatory molecules that adds to the inflammation that can increase the clogging in the arteries. There are certain mechanisms in the body how cholesterol is moved around and away from the circulation. There are things that is called ABC transporter proteins, secondary bile acids. These all work together to remove the excess cholesterol from the circulation out into the gut so that we can eliminate it. All of this process depends on eating enough amount of fruits and vegetables, enough dietary fiber, and the other aspect is the LDL cholesterol. In order for it to become the dangerous LDL cholesterol, it needs to get oxidized, and if we have enough antioxidants in the food, that can also be countered. That oxidized LDL effect can be countered. So it's much more than a cholesterol, and that's something to keep in mind. Myth number 6 is looking at blood pressure and thinking that, oh, I'm going to focus on reducing the sodium intake, my table salt intake, and that'll take care of it. It is important, but it's not the only thing, right? So you might have heard of something called DASH diet. And over the years, the scientists and medical science have understood that it's not just about the sodium reduction. It's also about making sure that we have enough dietary fiber, enough fruits and vegetables through leafy greens, salads, legumes, whole grains. All of that matters to work with our kidneys to regulate the sodium level in the blood, and that helps the blood pressure. Also, the potassium that we find and magnesium that we find in fruits helps that as well in terms of reducing the blood pressure. Myth number 7, this has been going on for a long time. We had a misconception that eating fish prevents heart attacks. And the omega-3 aspect was considered to be the beneficial aspect in that. So in science, the way we look at data and evidence is through different types of research trials. But how do you look at the whole totality of evidence of research conducted over decades on a particular subject is something called systematic review or meta-analysis. This particular Cochrane analysis looks at it looked at 86 randomized controlled trials that looked specifically at fish intake and heart disease, omega-3 and heart disease, to identify what does the evidence show. And there were 162,000 participants in this total analysis. They included studies. Some of them were conducted for 12 months, some of them were for 88 months, a good follow-up duration, and they found that there is little evidence of effects of eating fish on protecting heart disease, on omega-3 supplementation, and so forth. Myth number 8, we're looking at dietary fiber. Now, generally, when we think about fiber, we think about gut health, right? Constipation, making sure that the gut health is improved by fiber intake, especially wholesome fiber from dietary fiber. But we also now know that it's not just about the gut health, it also helps the heart, right? So how does it do it? Number one, dietary fiber makes sure that our insulin levels are regulated well, and that helps to protect the arteries. When we have excess amount of insulin circulating in the bloodstream, when the arteries get exposed to that, they can start to develop clogging. So making sure that the insulin levels are regulated normally through dietary fiber in the food actually helps the arteries, right? And then, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, the kidney's ability to regulate sodium is controlled by our friendly bacteria in the gut, which works with dietary fiber. And the third one that is usually looking at in the slide is called TMAO, and the full expansion is trimethylamine N-oxide, and that's a particular molecule that is released when our body, our microbiome, the good bacteria in the gut is working on our food and breaking it down. That particular TMAO can be harmful to create blockage in the arteries. And the amount of fiber that we eat can change the type of good bacteria that we have in the gut, and that can reduce this TMAO levels to protect our arteries from harm. Myth number 9, looking at antioxidants. And when we talk about antioxidants, generally, we think about cancer, right? So oxidative stress is where the cells can get damaged by high energy, unstable molecules called oxidants. And we know that can be a part of the reason why cancers happen. But we know now that the same antioxidants in colorful fruits and vegetables, like the ones that are displayed here on the left, you can see the leafy greens, the colorful fruits, the antioxidants in them can not only prevent cancer, they also help to prevent artery blockages. As I mentioned earlier, one example of that is the oxidized LDL piece, where the LDL cholesterol becomes the dangerous form, and the antioxidants can counter that. And there are other elements where the antioxidants can make sure that the arteries are remaining healthy. And so there are different studies that have been looked at. All the references for the data that I'm sharing are going to be uploaded along with the slides next week in the website that I mentioned earlier, and I'll mention it again. So as this slide shows, making sure that we're getting enough fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and nuts has been shown to reduce death from cancer, heart disease, and stroke. And looking at the last myth for today's discussion, once clogged, the heart arteries cannot be unclogged by diet. And now we have data that shows that a well-planned regimen of oil-free, 100% whole food, plant-based diet can unclog the arteries. It is an intervention that needs to be well-planned, including avoiding oil. And studies are showing, as you can see in that particular picture, that is an angiogram of a main artery in the heart called left anterior descending artery. It's a major supplier of blood to the heart. And on the left side, if you see those two black and white images that you see, among the two images, on the left one, you see that the dye is very narrow. and the other one is showing that it opened up after a dietary change. The other one you're seeing the color pictures on the top is a PET scan of the muscle and the blood flow to the muscle of the heart. Where there is a little white arrow, there is no blood flow. That's why it's a gray area without red or yellow. And on the bottom picture, you're seeing that the blood circulation returning. That's after 3 weeks of whole food plant-based oil-free diet there. So that's a quick wrap up there. And some of the foods that are shown here, you're seeing protein choices that are having fiber, like beans, flax powder that has the omega-3 naturally coming in, and other types of whole grains instead of processed grains. That is going to be helpful to bring in the fiber, and the vegetables that we talked about, the colorful fruits, and that are going to be adding different types of nutrients. The leafy greens, one of the things I didn't mention so far is that there is also these naturally occurring nitrates that are in leafy greens, in beets, for example. And those nitrates will be processed by the body, and they can help to supply enough raw material for what is called as nitric oxide that opens up the arteries as well. So the naturally occurring nitrates in leafy greens and beets is another element how heart can be improved, heart health can be improved, the artery health can be improved. So, so there you have it. That's the wrap up on the top 10 myths and facts on heart health nutrition. As I mentioned, you can type in the questions if you have questions in the chat box. The slide deck along with the references will be made available to you next week, along with a recording of this video at www.capecodhealth.org/heart. So it looks like folks are starting to send questions. The first question is, what is the daily amount of fiber recommended? So the national recommendation is 35 grams as a minimum. And if somebody is not used to fiber at all, it's best to kind of start low and go slow as you build it up. And but the minimum is 35 grams, and it you can also go more than that, which will be even better for overall health, but as one can tolerate it, so slowly. Question is, the next question is, how much alcohol is safe for heart health? So there was actually in December 2024, the National Academy of Sciences did an extensive review on alcohol and health overall, and different aspects of the health. And they concluded two things. One is moderate amount of consumption of alcohol helps slightly for the heart disease. And at the same time, even that level of alcohol could potentially increase the risk of cancer in many individuals. So when we look at the totality of health, there's nobody just focusing, saying, like, I can get cancer, but I just want to protect the heart, right? It's not like that. So we have to look at the totality of health. And in that sense, less is more. So, even daily alcohol intake in moderation can be harmful from the cancer perspective. So less frequent is safer for overall health. The question is, why should we be avoiding egg whites? Should we avoid all poultry? So yeah, I think when we look at when we showed that one of the studies that I showed, looking at congestive heart failure, heart attacks, they did find that reducing poultry helped as well. And with regard to eggs and egg whites, all of this relates to the type of protein. And the animal protein excessively can increase inflammation in general. And so that inflammation is a key part of how the clogging in the artery starts to build up more and more. In order for the initial seed change in the artery, called fatty streak, for that initial change to start to kind of slowly build up as a clog, our inflammatory cells has to come and pile on it slowly, and that's how the clog starts to build up. So anything we do to reduce inflammation is helpful in this regard. And so avoiding excessive amount of animal protein in general, whether it's egg whites or poultry, is going to be helpful in this regard. Same with high fats, same with high sugars. They can also injure the lining of the gut, which releases inflammatory molecules. How much? Yeah, there's another person asked the same question about the fiber. So yes, 35 grams is something you want to aim for minimum. And if you're starting from a lower number, go slow and we can build it up. How does portion control impact heart health? That's a good question. So when when somebody doesn't have portion control, when there is excessive food coming in, especially calorically dense food, and that high calories, that excessive high calories can do two things, right? It can start to add more cholesterol to the body. Number two, it can start to build something called visceral fat or abdominal fat, and that is a type of fat that is deep inside the abdomen, encasing, surrounding the intestines. And that visceral fat is known to be highly inflammatory. It releases those inflammatory molecules, like I mentioned, and that inflammation can cause the artery to be getting into trouble. So in that sense, excess calories coming from not having enough portion control can be harmful in those two regards. Is the heart healthy value of fruits and vegetables reduced if they are cooked? Good question. So no, I think cooked or raw fruits and vegetables bring a lot of benefit to the heart health, regardless of that. Yeah, looks like there are more questions here coming in. Besides fruit, what do you recommend for healthy, low-sugar dessert options and treats? Good question. So besides fruit, I would my go-to what I recommend is I know it's still a fruit, but dates. Dates are has a much sweeter than regular fruits. Again, dried fruits in general, like apricots, dates. Anything, if somebody is making a dessert, anything you can use with sticking to more whole grains and sweetening it with these kind of dates is always a better way to make a dessert as well. If someone follows a whole food plant-based diet, is a B12 supplement recommended, and what is the recommended dose? So B12 supplement is something that is recommended generally for anybody who's above 50, anybody who has had a course of antacids or things like omeprazole and other medications over the course of the years. All of them, it's best to take a B12. And yes, if somebody's on a 100% plant-based diet, regardless of the age, we recommend B12. It's 1,000 micrograms a day as a supplement. Is olive oil a heart healthy fat? And this is probably something I could have added as another myth number 11. So studies have gone back and forth on this, and the oil part, when they study the olive oil, it seems to be more harm than good. When it comes in its whole package, which is the olives, right, the natural package, which is the olives, as the olives being a small part of a general diet, which is the Mediterranean diet originally, before oil and all came in, that was okay. But the oil alone, studies are showing that they can start to interrupt the ability for the arteries to open up. The nitric oxide that I mentioned that allows for the arteries to open up, that ability, that endothelial function, what we call, where the lining of the artery remains healthy and it can open up whenever it needs to open up to allow more blood flow, that ability can be affected from excess olive oil. So less is more. How do fermented foods impact heart health? That's a good question. Fermented foods, for example, sauerkraut, can be very beneficial for the friendly bacteria in the gut. And when the friendly bacteria in the gut is thriving well, it can help the heart health in two ways. One, it can eliminate excess cholesterol by producing something called secondary bile acid that I mentioned in one of the slides. And it can make sure that the ABC transporter proteins are functioning well to kind of get rid of the cholesterol. The cholesterol has its own traffic, and the traffic makes sure that it stays away from the circulation, right? That's the whole point, to keep the cholesterol away from the circulation. So these ABC transporter proteins help that. So the dietary fiber and the fermented foods that helps the friendly bacteria in the gut can help the mechanisms of the transporter protein, keeping the cholesterol away from circulation, secondary bile acids that takes out the excess cholesterol, dumps it into the gut, and we eliminate it. And the TMAO that I mentioned, which is another way that the artery can get injured, and fermented foods, making sure there are enough healthy bacteria in the gut, can keep the TMAO levels low, so that the arteries are protected from that regard. Okay, questions keep coming. What is the impact of caffeine on heart health? So again, coffee is another one that has gone back and forth in science in terms of good, bad. In general, it's either neutral or only beneficial for overall health. For some individuals who are very sensitive to the caffeine, these are individuals who smell a coffee and they can't sleep that night, right? So when they're very sensitive to caffeine, in those individuals, temporarily it can have an effect on their heart rate being going fast. Temporarily, blood pressure can be changed, but generally it's considered healthy. Are there heart healthy herbs I can add to my diet? So in terms of heart healthy herbs, generally things that helps for anything like an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant rich herbs are going to be helpful. And again, we're not talking about a particular supplement. We're not talking about somebody eating turmeric in the morning, lunch and dinner. It's being as part of a general diet, on a weekly menu, adding all these elements that is being displayed here, and the herbs coming into the flavoring is helpful. So turmeric, for example, curcumin. Turmeric is a yellow-colored herb spice from a root, and that has antioxidant properties. Ginger is known to have anti-inflammatory properties. Oregano has anti-inflammatory properties. Rosemary has anti-inflammatory properties. So there are some of these herbs can be mixed up as part of your diet. Yeah. So so we're going to take 3 more questions here, and as I mentioned, you can always email as questions that come up later to outreach@capecodhealth.org, and we will respond to your question by email. So the question here is, what oil should we be using on salads? So the less is better. So if you want something fatty, anything that that can be made as a dressing with tahini, which is a sesame seed paste, um, is is a good way to kind of have a kind of a dressing that has that fatty feel to it. So tahini is one way to do it, and to a lesser degree, walnut oil, which has a little bit of omega-3, can be added. I don't recommend it as much for cooking, but it can be a salad dressing as well. But tahini is the kind of the go-to that I recommend. How healthy is oatmeal? Yes, oats have high dietary fiber that is healthy for the gut lining and the friendly bacteria, and in that regard, it is better. And if the oatmeal is going to replace another meal in the morning that had more sugar, more processed carbohydrates, then we are avoiding injury to the lining of the gut coming from that sugary meal. So in that sense, it's a healthy addition to the meal. How does a high protein diet impact heart health, even if plant-based protein? How much protein do you need? Very smart, intelligent question. So protein in general, if it is excessive, regardless of animal, plant source, it is a burden for the body. Body has to work hard to digest protein. Protein does not supply energy. We need to remember that. Only the fats and only carbohydrates can supply fuel for the body. In order for body to extract energy or fuel from protein, it has to go through some additional steps. It needs to invest more to get more energy from protein. So too little protein is harmful. Too much protein is harmful. And excessive animal protein is definitely on the harmful side, more on the harmful side. So how much protein we need depends upon how much calorie is your need for the day. So the way I would calculate on this, we can put that in the website when we upload the slides. It's a little calculation needed, but the way I recommend is first calculate your caloric need for the day. Go to something like online Mayo Clinic calorie calculator. That will ask you for age, gender, your activity level, height, weight. Put them all in. It'll give you your caloric need for the day. And that is if your weight is in the right place. So take that number, and then you need 10 to 15% of those calories coming from protein. Okay, so if somebody's caloric output is 2,000 calories, they need to eat, and they're in a healthy weight at that moment. 10% of that is 200 calories. So 200 calories should come from protein. 1 gram of protein gives 4 calories. So you divide the 200 by 4, it gives you 50 grams of protein. That's what that person needs, minimum. So we can maybe put a little slide. I can add a slide. I'll tell the team we'll add a slide to that, and just a calculation on how to determine your protein need. Yeah. So I appreciate you joining this evening for this program. As I mentioned, if you have any other questions, you can email us through that outreach email. And also, the presentation will be available, the recording will be available along with the slides and references at www.capecodhealth.org/heart. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.